polling stations closed about an hour ago, but we already have early exit polls. CNBC's Arabile Gumede joins us from London with the latest. Arabile, great to see you. Is this an existential crisis then in the making for the Conservatives?
Man, existential sounds like the opportune word in this moment, doesn't it, Sri? I mean, one can gather that this is going to be seismic. By the looks of this exit poll, 410 seats will ultimately be led through then for the Labour Party. That is a 170-seat majority then for the Labour Party. That is the second biggest victory then that they've had as the Labour Party, only being beaten out then by Tony Blair's a seismic landslide victory as well back in 1997. So it's very significant to see that in place. Of course, where they sit as well in the House of Commons will also be interesting to make note of. But clearly then it means that Sir Keir Starmer's election process and the campaigning even has certainly gone well. But the key question mark has always been whether this was a vote for Labour or whether it was a vote against the Conservative Party, who, of course, as you said a little bit earlier, have had a chaotic time, particularly in the last 3 years or so. One can point to elements like Partygate. You can even point, of course, to the betting scandals that have happened recently as well. And so much has happened in that time. Even the consistent change then, of course, of prime ministers as well then. So a lot of losses have been incurred then by the Conservative Party. Another loss, even just within this election, according to the exit poll, well, the Vice-Chancellor himself, Jeremy Hunt, could actually be the first Vice-Chancellor in history to lose his seat in an election, a standing chancellor that is, right? So that is quite monumental and kind of tells you the gravity of the situation that the Conservative Party are then facing. 131 seats is what they're anticipated to then get according to this exit poll. Again, itself would make it the worst defeat for the Conservative Party in history. Just giving you a sense of the market, the FTSE 100 has actually gone up around 7% this year in the lead up to this election. Again, it would only be beaten out. It's the second best performance by the FTSE 100 in an election year since 1992, only being beaten out then by the 1997 13% uptick then for the FTSE 100. So indeed, seismic numbers, records being broken all around.
Yeah, seismic. I really have to ask you, I mean, should it come to pass, Labour coming into these elections with a 20-point lead, right? If it is Keir Starmer and 10 Downing Street later, the biggest challenge that Labour and Keir Starmer faces is obviously the economy. What is the plan? He's promised not to cut taxes, but there's a lot of spending to do.
There certainly is a lot of spending, and that's been the key question mark then here, Martin, is what exactly does Labour plan to do here? Because they've said no hikes in VAT, they've had no hikes, they've said, in national insurance and the like, and they've said, yes, they're going to limit spending, but you kind of can't limit spending if you're aiming to pick up on growth and boost the economy, as well as aid investment a little bit further. You can't necessarily cut any more red tape, although that's what they also legislate to put forward then, because so much of that has already been done. But they believe that there is still a little bit more from that. They could ultimately benefit as well, let's remember, from the economy, which is set to pick up a little bit more from here, just because you're anticipating a recovery then from consumers, plus a cut in interest rates is anticipated to come through from the Bank of England as well soon after this election. Could even be happening in August. So a whole lot of that could certainly play into the hands of Labour. Just another question mark very quickly, guys, that before this election was then called, question marks were asked actually whether Prime Minister Rishi Sunak could have perhaps held back on having this election or calling this election, because the good news story economically, that is, on the economic data front, may have still been coming, and he may have been able to tell a better story then for UK consumers. But as it were, right now they look like they could be facing a pretty historic defeat at the election polls.
Arabile, in terms of relationships with the EU, does it feel like, if it is a Labour government with a very strong mandate, that they could not necessarily reverse Brexit, but move closer towards the EU and perhaps begin reintegration?
Yeah, that's certainly been the message even then by the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who says that moving closer to Europe, moving closer to the EU would actually be beneficial then in order for to help elements such as trade. Now, the reason why they still believe that they can't necessarily reverse Brexit is because they then still have authority. The UK still has authority then over its own borders, over its own waters, over its own jobs and recruitment, etc. As well. Key question marks will certainly be asked around hiring, firing and pay, and they have to be able to deal with that themselves. But the question also, the really important one and significantly, is that the rest of Europe has almost moved very much to the right, while the UK has moved to the left. How will those two elements then begin to clash in terms of economic policy, in terms of political aspects as well, and just the confrontations that will ultimately happen as well? So Keir Starmer, of course, is very soon set to have a meeting as well with world leaders just next week. Will that then mean, and of course this is on the basis of him being elected then as Prime Minister, if that is to come to pass then later today and into tomorrow, and the question mark will be, what will that relationship then look like? A lot will rest on his shoulders, and he will certainly need to be a lot more forthright with the expectations and what exactly the UK aims to achieve from here.